So, page 205 of Napper's book, I think we already mentioned that Prāsaṅgika indicates his acceptance of the law of the excluded middle, and even has a quote on 206 from Nāgārjuna. That suggests the same. And I think the rest of it, on page 209, the last indented paragraph, second line, yogis who have realized conventional truths which are produced only by ignorance. Now, does he mean that all conventional truths are produced by ignorance? In what sense are conventional truths produced by ignorance?
In that you're recognizing, you're saying you've got this book. And I can't really find the book ultimately, but I have to treat it like a book conventionally.
So it's ignorance that treats it as a book?
Yeah.
So therefore nothing actually exists. Wisdom shows nothing to exist. So you're the chief of the nihilists. So in what sense is this table or book, or, I mean, it's clear that the book is made from ignorance. In what sense is this table made by ignorance? Because it's something that is misconceived to be inherently existent, therefore a Buddha's body, a Buddha's mind would be made by ignorance, if that were the case. Something is either an ultimate truth or a conventional truth. And ultimate truths are only emptinesses. Therefore everything else, even a Buddha's mind, Buddha's palace, etc., the mandala, all these marvelous things, are all conventional truths. But in what sense would this table be?
So are all the Pure Lands then in some ways dependent upon ignorance?
Well, that's where the problem is with this. To understand what he's saying, however, I think you have to exclude all of those special objects. He could be saying, having realized conventional truths, and among them I'm talking about the ones that are produced only by ignorance. I don't know if that was what he meant. But I want to know, in what sense is this table made by ignorance? Because at least we've got to say the table is made by ignorance. In what sense is your body made by ignorance? That's easier to understand.
Because I designate I on... Oh, because I cause my own cycle of rebirth.
Yes, exactly. The 12 links of dependent arising begin with ignorance. And even this world wouldn't exist without those ignorant actions in the past. Okay? And so all of these things depend upon ignorance. In that sense, the external world, this external world. Now what you're going to do with Pure Lands is entirely different matter because they depend on pure wishes of the participants. Well, those who are going to participate in them? No, they depend upon the pure wishes of the Buddhas. So we could say he was not talking about that sort of conventional truth. So you don't need to get into things like ignorance, misconceiving it now and turning it into, somehow turning it into a conventional truth. No. But in a way, it's much more profound. And if, for instance, our meeting here today establishes some sort of cause that is helping to mold a future world system. I'm adapting this from the Dalai Lama sitting in a window seat in the Catskills. and talking with John Abaddon a number of years ago, and I was translating, and he was talking about our meeting there, and that this influencing how some world system is developing somewhere into which we will be reborn in the future. Now one has to be open to the Gelukpa scholars say a Buddha's wisdom is a conventional truth, that Pure Lane is a conventional truth. Would Candrakīrti actually hold this? To follow, you have to be open to not getting frozen into what Gelukpa scholars, it turns out, in their fuller system make things into, and what Candrakīrti's actual system was. So when you start reading Candrakīrti, you get into a morass. He may have meant that those other things are mere conventionality. But that's another topic. We will get to that soon. Then, on page 212, in the middle paragraph, Tsongkhapa was pointing out that Candrakīrti doesn't say nihilists have assertions, but we don't, and therefore we're different from nihilists. He says we assert dependent arising, and that's why we're different from nihilists. So as I said earlier, we're primarily studying the thought of Candrakīrti, even if he's commenting on Nāgārjuna. And again, that distinction one has to make. We can't assume that everything Candrakīrti says of Nāgārjuna is necessarily the case, even though this school takes it to be the case. And Candrakīrti is elevated to a point where if he says anything that is seemingly self-contradictory, that contradiction is worked out. His thought is positive. Gongpa Shakta, what he really meant. Whereas if other people made such similar statements, you wouldn't work it out. Okay. As you saw in this section, there's a lot of discussion about my emptiness is more subtle than your emptiness. We get a gradation of teachings, and the gradation is such that the Prāsaṅgika school can even say that you can't be liberated even from cyclic existence, never mind attain Buddhahood, by the view set forth by any other school, right? Yeah. So it comes out that, Candrakīrti's group, as these implications are drawn by Gelukpa scholars, becomes extremely exclusivistic. And everybody wants to be exclusivistic. Wanted to be at that time. And there's certainly a great deal of exclusivism nowadays, although maybe the people in this room, at least when it comes to some topics, probably aren't so exclusivistic. Isn't there a certain trend, away from that? Even nihilistic, a nihilistic relativism, or a relativism that for some reason doesn't become nihilistic. That's sort of, I guess, where I am. And I can't explain it well, but I'm both relativistic and not absolutistic at the same time. Almost a thirst to put down others, such that, as I've said, within Gelukpa colleges, people will think, oh, people from that other college couldn't possibly, they don't have the right view. So they, from a Gelukpa college, one to another, right? And so you get within various strands within any sect, this group putting down that group, and to the point where you become quite convinced that nobody has the truth. It's with such an extreme interest in gradation and saying that, well, this teaching isn't final, that one isn't final. You wonder what one is final, and you begin thinking none's final. And I've had to think, well, just because all the car manufacturers brag that their car is the best, doesn't mean that some car isn't the best. But I can't figure it out which one the best is, even with respect to cars. So, let's do some terminology, because we get some terminology straight. And the purpose will be to get at the various types of emptiness and selflessness, because it's always empty of what, and this what that things are empty of changes. And even if there are, it seems to be sociological, political, economic reasons for such great differentiation to take place, no question was there, I just take this for granted. What the hell is a cyclic existence? And this doesn't afford much interest to me. I mean, I have to notice it, and I have to keep track of it, so that it doesn't interfere with the things that I'm more interested in. But I don't spend my time, saying, this is how it works out. How it manifests. It just doesn't interest me. Hasn't interested me for 32 years. Prior to that, it did. What does interest me here is stimulation with regard to selflessness. I guess it's as simple as that. Not deciding who's right, who's wrong, but being stimulated in various ways with respect to figuring out what self is in selflessness, what the many levels of misconception could be. Okay. 4 schools of tenets. First school, lowest school, Madhyamaka, which I translate as?
Great exposition.
This is a handy way that was worked out of amalgamating at least 18 different Indian schools, okay? Some of which were precursors to great vehicle schools, and thus, when you read their individual assertions, you begin seeing that there's no school, and you can't say they all assert this or they all assert that. Very hard to make such statements. But they're amalgamated for a purpose, to stimulate the metaphysical imagination. And without a gross amalgamation, there is no way that you could go on. There are some resources. Bhava Viveka, Vasubandhu himself, most of these Indian writers, there are pieces here and there. The person to read is André Barrault. I did my own work with Giant Shiva's Great Exposition of Canada, mainly in there. Then the next one,
Prāsaṅgika.
which I translate as Sutra School. And these two are Hinayana, although obviously they don't call themselves Hinayana, right? But we're doing a so-called Mahayana view. I mean, some people wanted to make themselves better than others. Well, we are Mahayanas and they are the Hinayanas.
And we're not picking on real people here, right? I mean, that are still alive by.
Well, if you look at Theravada, Theravada is in here. It's one of the Vaibhashika 18 schools. Sautrandika, there's a Sautrandika in some renditions of the 18 schools. And then it's even hard to separate Vaibhashika and Sautrandika, in other words. In some renditions, it's one of the 18. Another rendition, it can be put out separately. Hinayana I translate as?
Lesser
Lesser
vehicle.
vehicle.
So, 18 schools, at least. And Sautrandika is divided into?
Those following scripture and those following reason.
And which is put higher? Very strong interest in hierarchy here, no question. No
Reasoning
question.
is higher.
Reasoning is higher. Those following scripture follow whom? What names are we going to associate? Vasubandhu. They're following Vasubandhu. What work in particular? Abhidhamma, the auto commentary to the Abhidhamma Kosha. Okay? Because it's in the auto commentary, not in the Kosha itself, where the Sautrandika's views are clear. Where Vasubandhu indicates his own disagreement with so-called Vaibhashika positions, which get lumped as Vaibhashika, not by him, but by others. He indicates his disagreement. So he's got a root text that the treasury, I call it treasury of knowledge. And then it's Vasubandhu's commentary on the treasury. Okay? This is, of course, Sautrandika on scripture. Sometimes he takes direct opposition. And then there are, I believe even in the root text, unsuitable endings. Comes in, translated in Tibetan, I forget what it is in Sanskrit. Where it's like an ending should be so, and it's translated then as low, to indicate disagreement. Those following reasoning are following whom? Nāgārjuna. And?
Candrakīrti.
Candrakīrti. Now, Nāgārjuna and Dharmakirti, it is said, were themselves proponents of mind only. So it's somewhat amazing that we have an external world system, which is what the Sautrantikas are, following people who are known for their mind only views. And in the case of Dharmakirti's famous text is Pramana-Vartika, which is commentary on Dignaga's, it's a commentary in a sense, but only in a very loose sense, on Dignaga's compendium of teachings on valid cognition. In that text, there are sections that are said to be Sautrandika, external world. There are sections that are Chittamatra, mind only, no external world. And there are sections that are common to Sautrandika and Chittamatra. Common to external world theory, internal world theory. This doesn't make any difference. Now, if 4 schools of tenets is so important, you would think the person would be so clear in the text that You know, you come down either this way or that way, and you wouldn't have this section going this way and another section going that way and another section, you know, common to both of those. But that's how they see it. Then, next one. Which is broken down into?
Follow scripture, follow reason.
Those following reasoning, those following scripture. And again, it's a little easier here. Why are those following reasoning considered to be superior to those following scripture? It's because it clearly sets forth a system of one final vehicle that everyone will achieve Buddhahood eventually. Even if in the meantime people are following some other path and even will bring that path to completion, they'll eventually become bodhisattvas and go on and become Buddhas. The Trimadrans following, therefore, who are they? Following reasoning? Ignaga and Dharmakirti again. Same text, remember? The same text having three types of passages in it. And scripture? Prāsaṅgika. And his brother, Vasubandhu, who was originally a Vaibhashika, himself somehow became a Candrakīrti and was converted by his brother Asanga to mind only. They're the main ones. And because they assert that there are three final vehicles, in fact, they assert that there are 5 lineages. They're following the Sunny-Namochana Sutra, the Sutra Unraveling of Thought. And this sort of thing is said in the sutra. And you could read it. Some people read it from the Madhyamaka standpoint, from the Swatantrika standpoint, that this is just temporarily. That people's lineage, it's called Rikcheva. Their lineage is severed. Their lineage it's like no matter how much hearing. Some of us feel this way about learning Tibetan. No matter how much hearing, practice, and so forth you do, you don't get anywhere. Wow. Yeah. And then there are 3 types. Those who are of Bodhisattva lineage from the very start, and through, for instance, hearing about love, compassion, and so forth, serving others, that lineage is activated and go on to achieve enlightenment as Buddha. Those who have lineage of hearers and the solitary realizers. And they go on to achieve the enlightenment of the Hinayana, but never go on anymore. And then there are people who switch from one lineage to the other. So there are 3, I guess in a sense, well, there are 3 where the lineage is definite. 1 where the lineage is separate, and 1 which is indefinite. And if you took that to be temporarily so, you can see it, right? People who would appear to be, you know, the Hitlers of the world and so forth, totally, you know, you'd say totally out of it for the time being. What?
It's like your karma takes you there.
No. It's chuniki neva. There are different opinions on this. There are different opinions abides by nature. And so thus it's very much like caste, you see. That's just the way it is. You didn't do anything to deserve it or anything. There are some within the mind, in this mind-only school who say that it's by doing certain actions. Some who say that it's naturally abiding, and some who say that it's a mixture.
This is the scripture, people.
Yes. But even everybody else holds it on a temporary basis. So then it wouldn't be Trinity never, would it? Because everyone, by nature, is going to achieve enlightenment. Everyone has the Buddha nature. So that's Dignaga and Dharmakirti. Dharmakirti presents reasons why enlightenment is open to all. Because the obstructions are impermanent, because there are techniques to overcome the obstructions, because there are people who know those techniques, because those people who know the techniques are compassionate enough to teach them. It goes something like that. And why I began this about the person whose lineage is severed, to me, here's my being a Buddhist, apologetic for that. It's like a scare tactic. Now, you wouldn't want to be like that, would you? So, you straighten up. No, I'm not like that. But that's true apologetic. It may be more the case that they really believed that people were endowed. Some people were more gregarious, mixing with other people, and when they did things, they did big things, and others are less gregarious and so forth. And when they do things, they do little things. And by observing that in behavior in people, this then is extended to religious hopes, you could even say. Then, next school, which I translate as?
Middle school. Middle.
Yeah, I throw in way only because middle school is a popular term. But I usually don't, I'm willing to call Aryans superiors. I'm not worried about Mother Superior. But middle school is just too. Now, this is divided into
Svatantrika.
Swatantrika as opposed to Sautantrika. And Prāsaṅgika. And the Swatantrikas are divided further into
the Yogacara Swatantrika Madhyamikas and the Sautrantika Swatantrika Madhyamikas.
Yogacara, so that means like Chittamatra, Swatantrika Madhyamikas, and the Sautrantika Swatantrika, this is Sautrantika, right? So Chittamatra is also called Yogacara. Sautrantika Swatantrika Madhyamaka. Now, who is the most famous Sautrantika Swatantrika Madhyamaka, who also founded Swatantrika? Bhava Viveka, you said, right? You said. Bhava Viveka. Who are the most famous Yogacara Swatantrika Madhyamikas, both of whom went to Tibet? Yeah! Candrakīrti. Yep. And his student, I use the H's in here because Candrakīrti and Kamalashila. Whoop. And the $64,000 question is, what is Tibetan for Kamalashila? They're all great Tibetan scholars. I've got a couple ringers over there. Well, they often say Gashi. Kamalashila, Gashi. But there is Tibetan. Peme Ngang Fu. Just in case you ever run. Peme is lotus. Ngang Fu is like mode. Peme Ngang Fu. Tignaga? Tibetan? Choklang? Nāgārjuna? Choja? Asanga? Kogme? Vasabandhu? Yinye? Bhava Viveka? Lekhenje? Candrakīrti? Shiva. And the most famous Prāsaṅgika? Candrakīrti. So, who's going to do up the list with all the Tibetan and so forth? Or two lists, or whatever? Now, how many of these divisions were not known in Tibet? I mean in India.
Just the division of Madhyamaka.
In India, the terms Prāsaṅgika and Svatantrika were never used. But the terms Swatantra and Prasanga were used, and based on them in Tibet, Bhava Viveka and so forth got to be called Swatantrikas. Candrakīrti got to be Candrakīrti, Buddhapalata and so forth got to be called Prāsaṅgika. Of course, Nāgārjuna we need here. Nāgārjuna really being a Prāsaṅgika, of course, because that's at the top in this hierarchical system. So, also, Sautrānika followers of scripture and followers of reasoning, even within Tibet, it's only Gelukpas who use this vocabulary. Wow. Now, a Sangha was prophesied by the Buddha as attaining the third bodhisattva ground in that lifetime, right? Third? Is that right? Third? He's nodding his head.
I think I remember.
Yeah. And thus, really, from the Prāsaṅgika point of view, he couldn't be a Chudamatra then. Because remember, with anybody else's view, you can't even get out of cyclic existence. Therefore, a Sangha really was a Prāsaṅgika. And this view is manifested in his commentary on Maitreya's Uttara Tantra, the Gyulam, the what do I call it? Sublime continuum of the great vehicle. Buddha nature being present in all beings. This is very clear in that text. And why particularly Prāsaṅgika as opposed to Svatantrika, I don't know. Now, anyway, I'm trying to, while I'm introducing this, at the same time show that it's a bit of a house of cards. But it's a house of cards that we're going to play with. And just you have to know that you're dealing with a construct for the sake of stimulating the metaphysical imagination, which I said was the main point. So let us turn to that. The two higher schools of tenets are called what? Mahayana. Let's get something straight first. Madhyamaka is a Mahayana system of tenets, right? Does it teach a Hinayana path also? You see, there are practitioners, hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas, right? These two are called Hinayana. This one is called Mahayana. This Hinayana Mahayana different from this Hinayana Mahayana. Essential to understand what's going on here. For instance, the Madhyamakas, the Prāsaṅgikas, all along here in this text, are telling you what hearers do, what solitary realizers do, with this deep view of emptiness. So they teach about this type of practitioner who is low. Why? Why?
Motivation.
Motivation. Motivation for the time being primarily is to take care of oneself, get oneself out of cyclic existence, and then you can turn to helping others. Whereas with the Mahayanist, the motivation is primarily to help others, even if you're educating this being right now, your motivation is primarily for others. So the motivation being Maha, greater, from that point of view, is called Mahayana. So, from that point of view, you can see that Prāsaṅgikas and Svatantrikas clearly teach about all three of these. Chittamātrins would too. Same thing. What about Sautrantikas and Vaibhashikas? They clearly tell you what hearers and solitary realizers do, but do they tell you what bodhisattvas do? So, by relating the story of how Shakyamuni in earlier lifetimes and so forth practiced and became the fully enlightened one of this era, also they speak about other beings who in the far, 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 far distant future, because of their practice over a long period of time, will become Buddhas in a completely different age, right? So in that sense, they set forth a path of the Bodhisattva, and they do call it Bodhisattva, as I remember. So now, in what sense, if we're going to call Sautrantikas and Vaibhashikas low, and Chittamātrins and Madhyamaka big, why? It's said that these four schools, there's an ascendancy of view, and the view of emptiness goes from the low to the great. Okay? Positive. Lump them. These two do this, and these two do this. You have to do that to explain it.
The difference between laws and selflessness of persons and selflessness of phenomena?
Yes. The two great vehicle systems set forth both a selflessness of persons and a selflessness of phenomena. The low vehicle systems, as amalgamated, blah, 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 set forth just as selflessness of persons. Therefore, these two systems set forth obstructions to omniscience, which means, in this case, simultaneous cognition of all objects of knowledge. Because these two actually do set forth a type of omniscience, because Shakyamuni Buddha achieved it. But it's a serial knowledge. There's nothing a Buddha can't know. This is amalgamation again, which is that a Buddha wants to turn the Buddha's mind, her mind, to anything she immediately knows, whatever it is. And that's sort of zero knowledge. Whereas this sets forth simultaneous knowledge of all objects, simultaneous cognition of all object knowledge, emptiness, and the phenomena that are qualified by emptiness. That's distinctive. Then, within the four, one has to set forth a gradation too. And I don't know of these two, Yogacara Svatantrika Madhyamaka and Sautrantika Svatantrika Madhyamaka, as being graded. It's within these, I would say, Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Chittamatra, Svatantrika, and Prāsaṅgika, that the gradation of view comes with regard to emptiness, selflessness. There's a gradation in here because the one is setting forth enlightenment for everyone, which is more like the schools above it. But it's not a difference in the view of emptiness. Okay? Selflessness. So, how are you going to posit the difference between when you said the Hinayana schools only set forth selflessness of persons? So how are you going to posit the difference between Vaibhashika and Sautrantika within that? Very hard. Very interesting that it's sort of like immediately the enterprise gets into trouble. But that doesn't knock down the enterprise. The enterprise is good enough for the rest of it so that this one will be tolerated. Some people say, well, among the 18 schools, there are a lot of different types of assertions, and they don't all uniformly assert, or they uniformly assert that the person is empty of being permanent, unitary, and independent. That's in counter to certain so-called Hindu views that person is permanent, unitary, and independent. And they all do that. But there's one school within it, sometimes with sub-schools, that sets forth that the person is inexpressible. It's inexpressible as being substantially existent or as not being substantially existent. And that, there are all sorts of ins and outs, ups and downs, and so forth. But the rest of them all do set forth the same substance of persons as Sautrantikas do. Okay? All right. We need another blackboard. Because I'm going to talk about Prāsaṅgika, which will be a way to talk about all of this. In Prāsaṅgika, the subtle selflessness is the absence of inherent existence, right? And by now you know it's divided into two. And what are those two? The selflessness of persons and of phenomena. Is one more subtle than the other? The object of negation is inherent existence in both cases. Therefore, there's no difference in subtlety between the two substances. Okay? The object of negation is the same. Object of negation is the same. And we're dividing the subtle selflessness, you see, into substance of person, substance of phenomena. What's the object of negation? Inherent existence. Then, we can posit a coarse selflessness of persons. And actually, within that, we can go into, I would do it in 3 types. The coarsest object of negation is that the person is permanent, unitary, and independent. All three together. It is said that there is no innate view of a person as all three of these. You have to train in it in order to have it. Although we have innate views of the person as permanent, innate views of the person as unitary. The one who walked over there is the one who walked over here. The one who went out that door is the one who went in this door, right? But I don't know how unitary also. I mean, do we innately feel I am one with the one who went over there? We don't really think about it. We just think I'm the one who went, you see? But that's enough. But the three together. Then, not so coarse is conceiving of the person and the aggregates as like Lord and subjects. Whereas a more subtle version of it as like a head salesperson and salespersons. This is Jayasheva's. This third tier here is kind of a clever addition. A head salesperson is a salesperson, right? It's like within the group, but it's like the boss within the group. And the group all has to look to me, and I tell them what to do. It's like looking on mind and body that way. Now, there are other parts of the example that aren't carried over. Head salesperson can't do her job without the salesperson's doing their job that way, but this isn't carried over. It's the boss part, the dependence. Lord and subjects, the subjects depend upon the Lord. The Lord isn't a subject, one of the subjects who's been put up as a Lord. You see some sort of gradation here. The object of negation. And then the object of negation, when you get to the subtle level, what all Gelukpa say about Prāsaṅgika is you can't get out of cyclic existence through cognizing the core selflessness on any of these levels. You must realize the selflessness of everything, of persons and phenomena. Because if you can realize it with respect to the person, if you just turn your mind to anything else, you'll realize it's selfless. Because the principle is the same. And in fact, one way to test your realization of personal selflessness, if you think, oh, I have realized that I'm selfless, is suddenly, that while the Dalai Lama took the example of, was it his tongue or his nose? And see, does the realization transfer to that? As a way to test yourself. I might put $1 million on the table and see if the realization transferred to that. And if it doesn't transfer, it's coarser. You get it? The principle is the same. The object of negation is the same. The subtlety is the same. Therefore, if you realize the one, you'll realize the other. Just by turning your mind to it. These other schools are talking about this kind of selflessness, the coarse one, that is just in terms of persons. If you want to get out of cyclic existence, you have to cognize the subtle selflessness. And if you do with regard to persons, you'll do it with regard to everything. And one sign that these other schools are talking about, from Swatandrika on down, when they're describing what they call the self-acceptance of persons, one sign that they aren't realizing this one, the self-acceptance of persons, is that they say there's a further self-acceptance of phenomena that's more profound, or they say other phenomena are truly existent. in the Prāsaṅgika school, because these two are of the same subtlety, the conception of a self of persons and the conception of self of phenomena, both of them will be afflictive obstructions. Neither of them will be obstructions to omniscience. There has to be something further that's an obstruction to omniscience. And because this, the conception of the opposite of the selflessness is the basis of the afflictive emotions, you must realize that selflessness in order to get out of cyclic existence. Otherwise, there'll always be something left. This understanding is not passed on. They don't transfer it over to the aggregates. I mean, they themselves say the person is selfless, the aggregates ultimately exist. Does that mean that Buddha in the Hinayana scriptures said this uniformly? No. Because you see, the Prāsaṅgikas are reading well. Nāgārjuna, Candrakīrti, and so forth are reading well the Hinayana scriptures and are finding their own emptiness there. It's just that all of these people couldn't find it there, right? They didn't see it there. There were other teachings there, that they fastened their minds on and so forth. So because the Swatantrikas say that if you cognize this kind of, the Lord and subjects is the one that's most frequently used, this kind of selflessness, you can get out of cyclic existence, and the Chittamantrans say this, Swatantrikas say this, Vaibhashikas say this. They're all wrong. They don't have a path that really will get you out of cyclic existence even. So they're all. But if you don't, there's that sort of, it's almost like crummy aspect to it. You're sort of feeling sorry for them all. At least I do. But if you think about this gradation, not as a way to put somebody down, but as a gradation in terms of penetrating veils of misconception, it's very interesting. I find it very interesting. And even though Nāgārjuna and so forth are saying, in effect, at least in Gelukpa interpretations, that all of these others with regard to getting out of cyclical existence were messed up, they are saying, they're very Catholic in the sense that they're saying, oh, just read the Hinayana scriptures. It's there. It's there. So they're Catholic in one sense, non-Catholic in another. Catholic meaning broad-minded. So then we need to look into what these other schools posit, these Swatantrika in its two divisions, and Chittamantra posit as the selflessness of phenomena. Okay? And so, for next time, we'll just keep going. You have the reading.